Hey everybody, this is TJR, and this is my review of the motion picture Elvis by director Baz Luhrmann. Before we get started here, if you like the content on this channel, please click like and let these videos play through to the very end. This way the YouTube algorithm recognizes this channel and recommends the videos to more viewers like you. Okay, let's get started. When I was a teenager, I can remember being in a supermarket checkout line with my mother. As we waited, she pointed out a tabloid newspaper headline that had a picture of Elvis Presley on the front page. And she commented on how unhealthy he looked. He was very big and puffy, and she just thought it was very sad. And she expressed a real concern, and she just wondered, what's wrong? Why isn't anybody helping him? Now, this would have been roughly a year before he died, maybe even sooner than that. Now, at this point in my life, I honestly could have cared less about Elvis Presley. To me, he was just some old singer that didn't matter anymore. And I honestly couldn't understand why he mattered to anybody at that time. Of course, I was just an arrogant and stupid teenager. In the 90s, I would begin to understand Elvis's innate musical genius, and I would begin to understand how, through that innate genius, whether intentionally or not, he would play a very large part in bridging the gap between black and white music. I also began to appreciate his amazing vocal ability and his outstanding showmanship. So it seems only natural that a director like Baz Luhrmann, whose visual style is synonymous with showmanship, should end up directing a movie about one of music's greatest showmen ever. So here's what I liked. I appreciated how well this film examined Elvis's roots in black music and how his talents led to culturally changing the musical landscape in America. One thing I don't want to do is downplay the role that black American music artists played in this cultural change. But sadly, at this particular point in America's very segregated history, this kind of change had to be led by a white American artist. I feel like this film finally gave real solid credit to Elvis's roots in black music. And I don't know of any other Elvis biopic or film, be it TV or movie, that has portrayed this influence and illustrated it in quite the way that this film did. I should add that this film also features portrayals of some of rock and blues's greatest and sometimes unsung pioneers of blues and rock and roll. And in some cases, these portrayals are being performed by contemporary music artists playing these legends. And this includes Yola as Sister Rosetta Tharpe and Gary Clark Jr. as Arthur Big Boy Crudup. Speaking of contemporary artists like Gary Clark Jr., throughout the film, director Baz Luhrmann, as he has done in the past, is mixing and mashing both old and modern pop music genres to great effect. The idea is not to pander to modern tastes, but to illustrate that these pioneering musical genres never leave us. They just keep being reinterpreted and remixed. I really enjoyed the soundtrack for this film. This includes the mashups and the use of hip-hop and hard rock music. By the way, that's Gary Clark's music you hear during the Hayride musical performance seen in the movie and in the trailer. Now, previously on this channel, I discussed the book The Colonel. And just like that book, this film clearly illustrates the harmful, manipulative effect that Colonel Tom Parker had on Elvis Presley, his life, his career, and his music, and how he financially abused him, but also how he eventually broke his spirit. And again, I haven't seen any other Elvis biopic really illustrate this aspect of his life in the way that this film did. As a result of this film, I have been hearing a lot of debate on the internet that Colonel Tom Parker, while controlling and abusive, took Elvis's career status to heights that other managers might not have been able to reach, almost as if to excuse him of his sins. But I would say that Colonel Tom Parker was a bad manager because he had no understanding for Elvis's innate talent and his potential. And as a result, he never maximized that talent to its fullest potential. I think that had he done so, I think Elvis would have been a lot happier, he would have lived a lot longer, and the two would have made more money. So what didn't I like? In the book that I referenced earlier, there is a fair amount of documentation regarding the feedback that Elvis received from film directors, Hollywood insiders who watched his screen tests and who all pretty much agreed that he had the capacity and the potential to be a great dramatic actor. Colonel Tom Parker, however, was much more concerned with how much money could be maximized off the movies that Elvis starred in, and he put that ahead of Elvis's desires to be taken seriously as an actor. I wish the film had illustrated this in some way. It didn't, but it did have a brief scene near the end where Elvis laments not having made a movie of any real lasting value. Getting back to what I liked, this is why the decision to have the character of Colonel Tom Parker act as the narrator for the film is a great one. In real life, people who are bad, people who are evil, rarely see themselves for what they really are. Everyone casts themselves as the hero of their own story. And all through this film, Tom Parker, through his narration, keeps trying to convince the audience and himself that he was the good guy. So let's talk about what a lot of critics don't like about this film. I know some critics have expressed a feeling that this film got tiring after a while and that it was way too long. I will say that by the film's end, I felt really wrung out. And honestly, I think this was the point. I walked out of this film feeling like I had really been through the ringer, through the highs and lows of this man's life. I don't think that I have ever been able to say that about any music biopic that I've seen previously, or any biopic for that matter. There has also been a lot of criticism that this film glosses over the fact that Elvis was a groomer. Priscilla was 14 when he met her, and he was at least 10 years older than her at the time. But I think it needs to be said that the world that this film takes place in was a lot different from the world we live in now, and a lot of what we felt was acceptable back then is different from what we consider acceptable now. Now, this little piece of reality that I've just stated doesn't make any of this right or excuse it. But I think we do have to temper our views of some of these individuals somewhat when we consider these things. And also, when I use the word acceptable then, I don't mean by all of society, I just mean certain segments of it. Many critics of this film feel this aspect of Elvis's life was just glossed over, but I think equally glossed over were his many affairs, his many indiscretions, affairs he had while grooming Priscilla and that he kept secret from her. While Colonel Tom Parker was definitely the villain in his life, there is some accountability that also needs to be given to the man himself, no matter how much you or I might admire his talents. It's highly likely that a lot of the reason why Elvis slipped into drug dependency was partly to medicate himself from the depression he must have felt by having his spirit continually broken by Colonel Tom Parker. But he also allowed himself to slip into that dependency as well. I'm not judging. And I felt a tremendous, and do feel a tremendous amount of sadness whenever I think about how much his artistic potential was not fulfilled, especially when the artist himself yearned to do so. But to a certain extent, we all have to take some of the blame ourselves in these situations. And in regards to this movie, I think in its effort to paint Colonel Parker as the villain, which is not undeserved, that too many of Elvis's own shortcomings were in fact glossed over. His affairs, his descent into drug addiction and paranoia, which led to an unhealthy obsession with guns. All of these aspects of his life were only just briefly touched on. Colonel Parker, no doubt, deserves his share of the blame for instigating his descent into drug dependency and paranoia, and also for certainly capitalizing on his paranoia in his attempts to control Elvis. I want to go back one last time now to the things that I liked about this film. Simply put, Austin Butler was amazing. He embodied an individual human being from youth to what was, for Elvis, the equivalent of old age. And by the end of this film, I felt the same sadness that my mother probably felt when she looked at that picture of him on the tabloid newspaper in the supermarket back in the 70s. Only I think I felt it 10 times more because I understood why. As for Tom Hanks's performance, I know a lot of critics have expressed either dislike or puzzlement over some of his choices as an actor. I personally had no problem with his choices or his performance. I liked his performance, and I think it complemented Austin Butler's performance. And to all of Tom Hanks's critics, I think that ensuring that his performance complements the movie's star performer may have been what he was going for, which is an interesting irony when you think about it. Anyways, those are my thoughts. I want to know yours. Please leave your comments. I'm looking forward to reading what you have to say. Again, if you like the content that I do here, be sure to hit like, hit subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon so you never miss a video. And now a big shout out to my patron supporters who are helping me make more videos. If you'd like to be a patron supporter, please go to patreon.com/TJR the original. Patron supporters get their name in the credits, and also they get exclusive weekly videos that no one else gets. Again, I want to encourage you to click like, hit subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon so you never miss a video. Everybody, thank you so much for stopping by and watching the videos. It really means a lot to me, and I really appreciate you a lot. Thank you so much. I hope you all stay safe and healthy. Take care.